Right, I don't really want to do this, but here we go. Today I'm going to be shooting minimalist portraits, which means I need a really clean, white, simple background. But let's be honest, it's never going to be this clean and white ever again, is it really? It's a lovely background though. It's from Easy Frame. It took me about 20 minutes to put up. It's going to work super well because the idea is to have lots of background but a subject that still gives lots of impact. And the best way to show you how to do that is basically to show you. So let's get a light set, which is well, basically that one really, isn't it? Let's get a model in and let's get shooting. It is washable, I'm sure. I'm sure it's washable. So to help me out today, I've got the amazing Jack. Jack's going to be the model for this photo session, and because this is a minimalist portrait session, let's go through the entire setup, starting right back here, where I've got the plainest, whitest, most basic background I could possibly get. Then I've got Jack, and then I've got a light, just the one. It's a Flashpoint Explore 300, and then I've got my camera. And that's basically it, and this setup really isn't going to change as we go through. Minimalist portraits using minimalist equipment. Some other things that are not going to change are my camera settings. So I've got 250th of a second for my flash sync speed, f5.6 for reasonable depth of field, ISO 200, and if I take a picture like that with no flash firing, I get no flash, no picture. I've got control of the room lights. To make my pictures feel minimalist straight out of camera, I've got 3 tips for you. And let's start with the lighting. Now, you might think maybe you want to do some dramatic lighting, some exciting lighting, but for minimalist, I've actually gone with a large softbox and a Flashpoint Explore 300 as my light source. And the reason for that is because I want to have gentle shadows. I don't want the lighting to become the dominant part of the picture. So, minimalist approach with the lighting. However, it's not boring lighting. Let me show you what it looks like. Okay, Jack, here we go. We have nice shadows on Jack. It's interesting, but the lighting doesn't dominate the picture. It's minimalist. Tip number 2 is all about the cropping and composition of the images. So when it comes to composition, I actually want to include a lot more of the background than I normally would. That empty background is going to add to the minimalist feel. And to maximize that result with a close-up picture like I'm doing now, I'm going to change my format of my camera's crop from 3:2 to 16:9. That, if I take this picture, that is going to give us the look and feel of a much wider picture within the same space. And my third way of making my pictures feel more minimalist is to reduce the number of colors in the picture, or even remove them completely, which is the easiest way of doing it. So Jack's not wearing anything too colorful, but the more colors you have, the more distractions you have. So I could do it in post-processing. In fact, that's really where I would recommend doing it. But if you want to see what it looks like during the photo session, have a look at black and white settings in your camera. It's not going to stay black and white necessarily, but it gives me an idea of how this is going to look whilst I'm going through the photo session. And of course, you can always change your mind later as well. Because I'm shooting everything in RAW, I don't have to stick to the black and white I've made in camera. However, this is all set up. So, Jack, are you ready?
Ready.
Let's take a few photos like this. Here we go. You could make this background even more dramatic by enlarging the background in post-processing, and I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. Those pictures work really well as close-up pictures, but if you want to do a full-length minimalist portrait, it's a little bit more challenging in a small home studio. Let me show you the problem. Jack, can you just stand up for me? So Jack's going to stand up. I'm going to go to the other end of my studio, which, let's face it, isn't particularly far away. I'm going to take a picture and see if anyone can spot the problem. Yeah, that isn't really going to work for me. So there's a few ways I could fix it, but the easiest way is, Jack, would you just sit down for a second? Problem solved. Now, if I take the same picture again, or more or less, I've got plenty of space above Jack, I've got room in front of his feet. There are parts of this picture that are going to have to be either cropped away or cloned in post-processing, and we'll get to that in a minute. And I'm going to change one more thing. I was working at the 16:9 ratio, which for the horizontal pictures was perfect, but for vertical actually squeezes my space a little bit too much. So I'm going to change my crop in camera to 4:3, which gives me a lot more room left and right. And yes, I'm shooting in RAW, so I could add that back in later. And it just helps me to see in camera what I will have the potential to do in post-processing. One other thing I've changed is the color. The black and white work really well with the close-ups, but with the full length, I think I want to have a color picture that is muted in its color tones. So that's what I've gone for, but it doesn't really matter because I'm working in RAW, so I can change all of that in post-processing, and I probably will. So let's have a look at how I'm going to frame this up. I'm going to come as far away from Jack as I can. That'll help with compression. And if I take a picture where I've just framed it up with the very edges of the background at the edges of my frame, I'm going to maximize the amount of background I get in my pictures to make it feel like Jack is quite small in the shot. That's the whole minimalist idea. You'll notice that there is a little bit of shadow on this, and that is very intentional. I don't want it to be completely empty. I don't want Jack in a white box. I want there to be a hint of something there, but again, it's not a dramatic shadow. It's a minimalist shadow. So that's basically the full length setup done. So Jack, are you ready? Ready. Let's take a few photos like this. Here we go. The easy frame background works really well, but if you want something a little bit low cost and a bit more temporary, just white seamless paper will be a great alternative. You've probably already figured this out, but my approach to a minimalist portrait is actually to maximize the background. And I've got a camera that works in the 4:3 format. Whichever format of camera you've got, maximize the real background, because now I'm actually going to add in an artificial background. And I'm going to use the easiest tool possible. I'm using the remove tool here in Photoshop. I'm doing it on its own layer because, well, I want a little bit of a safety net in case it goes wrong. But let's face it, use the easiest tools that you can. If they work, great. If not, try the harder tools. But that was perfect, wasn't it? Now, I could stop here, but I actually think this would be better with even more background than I actually had. And to achieve that, I'm going to use the crop tool. But before I do that, let me not forget to actually make a copy of this. I'm going to hold the Alt, Control, Shift, and press E to make a duplicate but flattened layer. And then I'm going to get the crop tool, make sure my crop is set to 1:1 square, because I think a square format should fit quite nicely. And just drag out a little square just like that. There we go. I'll switch off the other layers so I can see what's happening. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just get the marquee tool, the rectangular marquee tool, and just click just outside and drag to just outside in the other direction, making sure I don't select any of the chair or anything else, because now I'm going to use a bit of edit and free transform. I'll start using some keyboard shortcuts now, just to drag this across and fill in that area, and I'll repeat that process on the other side, making sure I don't get Jack's shoe, otherwise he'll have clown feet, which is not a good look. And again, I'll just drag that across. I'm holding the Shift key as I drag, so I only drag in one direction. Okay, that's basically it. What can happen is you can stretch the pixels out when you do that. It can look a little bit strange when you look close. So to fix that, I'm just going to do a little bit of a cheat. I'm just going to get a texture. Let's go to Select and All, Edit and Copy. Paste this using Edit and paste over my picture. I'll put a link to this texture from my website, and all of the gear I'm using, I'll put links in the video description down below. We use a bit of free transform just to stretch this out. Let's go mad. Look at that. Perfect. And where's Jack gone? Well, he's just underneath here in the layers. So I could just drop the opacity down, but I'm actually going to change the layer blending mode to multiply and drop the opacity down, probably something like that. For good measure, I'm going to put a layer mask on here, B for brush, and just make it a little bit smaller. and just paint over Jack's face and bring anything back I need to bring back. And with a few tweaks and adjustments, there is my final minimalist portrait completed. Actually, I could have changed just one thing and I could have skipped the entire of that Photoshop my background bigger step. All I needed to do was get a bigger studio, because that would have made my background a bit bigger. This is the real world though. This is what actually happens. Now, if you've enjoyed this video or you've got any questions, leave me a comment down below. Click on the bell icon and you'll never miss a video right here in Adorama TV. And to really help me out, click on the thumbs up button for this video. That would be much appreciated. And of course, click on the subscribe button. I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.